This call is now being recorded. This call is now taking notes.
Okay, let's get started. So, we're going to start off with the main thing with with everything to do in biology that's constantly going to keep cropping up, and that's respiration. So if anyone asks you what is respiration, the most common answer that people give is breathing. And it specifically says in the mark scheme for all exam boards that you cannot say breathing. Breathing is the process. So breathing is the process of taking in oxygen and taking out carbon dioxide. So when you're breathing in, you're taking in oxygen. When you're breathing out, you're giving out carbon dioxide. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what respiration is. That's quite a common misconception. So just want to highlight that just before continuing. So what is respiration? Respiration is the process by which we use the oxygen that we take in to release energy. So respiration, if there's one thing to take away from this class, is the definition of respiration and what it exactly is. So respiration is the process of taking in oxygen. So we breathe that in. We then use glucose. And where do we get glucose from? Glucose we get from our food. So anything that we eat, we're getting glucose from that. In turn, that then turns into carbon dioxide, which we breathe out, and also turns into water as well, which we release as well by sweating, when going to the toilet, and so on. So that's what the process of respiration is. And the reason why we do this process is to release energy. Now, another common misconception that students do here as well, instead of saying release, they say produce, and you can't say produce. You cannot produce energy, you release energy. So do not say the word produce. I'll just keep that here and just cross that out. Do not say the word produce. We can't produce energy. So if you think back to physics, we can't create or destroy energy. The conservation of energy principles, we just release it. So that's the whole point of respiration. And without respiration, we wouldn't be able to live. We need to be able to release energy. Okay, let's continue. So you also need to know the symbol equation for this. So oxygen is just O2. Glucose is C6H12O6. That goes to carbon dioxide, which is CO2 plus H2O. And again, if you link this to chemistry as well, you can see every symbol that's on the left-hand side. So we've got a carbon, we've got hydrogen, we've got oxygen, is also on the right-hand side. So conservation of mass, we cannot create anything from anything. It has to just be transferred. We can see there's carbon, hydrogen, oxygen there, and same with the product side as well. We need to balance this as well. So I just memorize this. You just need a 6 in front of everything except glucose, and that does balance it out. So make sure you know both these versions of the equation, the element equation, the balanced version of it, and also the word equation as well. So anyone asks you what's respiration, it's the process of breathing in oxygen, getting glucose from your food, which then in turn turns into carbon dioxide and water, and the whole purpose of this is to release energy. So that's respiration. Now there's one other thing I want to touch upon as well whilst we're here as well, is photosynthesis. Photosynthesis. Because if you can remember the equation for respiration, photosynthesis is just backwards. Now think about a plant. What does a plant do? A plant takes in our carbon dioxide that we breathe out, as well as carbon dioxide that's in the air. And what do we give to a plant? We water a plant, so water. In turn, the plant then releases oxygen, which we use, as well as glucose. Think about it, we can eat plants, and the reason why is because they release this glucose. So as you can see, you should notice the pattern. These are just opposites of each other. So if you remember one way, you should remember the other way. But let me just write this down. So they're just opposites of each other, respiration and photosynthesis. And the whole point of photosynthesis, well, another thing you need to know as well is photosynthesis does not happen if there's no light. So this process also needs light. Now you need to remember what is doing each process. Now, photosynthesis just happens in plants. We can't photosynthesize as animals. So this just happens in plants. whereas respiration happens in both animals and plants. So animals and plants. Okay, so I'd say that's everything. Well, there's one thing as well to mention about respiration. This is quite a common one that students forget, that respiration also happens in plants as well. Remember, plants, both photosynthesis and respiration. Animals, just respiration. Now, respiration breaks up into two other processes as well. So we've just gone over one equation. We'll go over this in a minute. I'll just keep these here. Okay, so respiration, the normal respiration that we do, so the equation that I've just shown you, that's known as aerobic respiration. Respiration. So aerobic respiration is essentially what I've just told you up here. So I'll just copy this down. Okay, so that's aerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration happens when there's enough oxygen. So right now, you're all, I'm guessing, sitting down whilst watching this meeting. You're just aerobically respiring. There's no reason for you to not be aerobically respiring because you've got enough oxygen to breathe in. Okay, so that's aerobic respiration. What's the other version? The other version that can happen is anaerobic respiration. Now, what anaerobic respiration is, it happens when there's not enough oxygen. Now, why would there not be enough oxygen? The reason why there wouldn't be enough oxygen is, say, for example, you're exercising and you're not breathing enough oxygen in, so therefore aerobic respiration can't happen. There's not enough oxygen. So this tends to happen when exercising. And it's the reason why sports people, so mainly boxers, they focus a lot on their breathing techniques. They're trying to take in as much oxygen as possible so so anaerobic respiration doesn't happen. You want to be aerobically respiring as much as possible. Okay, so they're the two kinds of respiration. So what happens in anaerobic respiration? Well, we just put double arrow here. We don't have oxygen, so this isn't going to come down. So what's going to happen is the glucose is going to change straight to lactic acid. And what lactic acid is, say when you're running and you feel that stitch on the side of you, that's what lactic acid is. And of course, that slows you down. Your body doesn't want to be anaerobically respiring because it's creating that lactic acid. So for that lactic acid to go back to glucose, what you have to do is you just have to stop, and then it will go back to glucose. You'll start breathing in more, and then you'll start aerobically respiring. Okay, I can notice my video is a little bit glitchy. Is it glitchy on everyone else's side as well, or is it okay? It's fine for me, glitchy as well. Okay, let me just do something with the internet, and I'll just join back on. Okay, let's try that. Hopefully that'll be okay. If it does get glitchy, just drop it in the chat and we'll try and sort something out about that. But anyway, as I was saying, so two types of respiration. We've got aerobic respiration, we've got anaerobic respiration. We don't want to be anaerobically respiring. We want to be aerobically respiring. So in order to get rid of that lactic acid, you just have to stop breathing so we get oxygen and for this process to then take place again. Okay, so that's a little bit about respiration. Now let's talk a little bit about the cells where these happen, where respiration and photosynthesis happens. So we've got the animal and plant cells. These are type of eukaryotic cells. So eukaryotic cells. Now, what eukaryotic cells means, it's just a cell that has a DNA in a nucleus. So it's not free floating. So eukaryotic cells are both animals and plant cells. The other version of cells, which I'll just quickly put down here, prokaryotic cells. These are bacteria cells. So prokaryotic cells essentially means the DNA is just free floating. It's not inside a nucleus. It's just free floating. So two types of cells that you also need to know about. I'll just put a little note. What I'd also say as well to take away from this meeting is kind of use the technique that I'm using as well as like a revision technique. So it's a bit like blurting, kind of understanding things and just blurting it all out. So you'll get all this sent out after as well, so you can blurt from it as well. So DNA in a nucleus, whereas in the prokaryotic cells, the DNA is free floating. So usually this is in the form of like a plasmid, so like a plasmid ring, or it just might be circular. So I'll just show you an example of a bacteria cell actually and put it on this document so you've got it. Have a look. Yep, so if I look at this one here, for example, let's copy. Okay, so we've got an example there. So as you can see, with a bacteria cell, we've got the DNA just free floating in the middle. So it's not inside a nucleus, it's just free floating in the middle. I'll just leave that there for reference. The flagellum, you also need to know that bacteria has that. Now, the reason why bacteria has that is so it can move. Think about the purpose of bacteria. It's to essentially get you ill. So we'll come on to pathogens and such as well, but it needs to be able to move. So that's the reason why it's got that. So yeah, main thing with the bacteria cell, the most important thing that you need to know for GCSE is the DNA is just free floating and it's not contained within a nucleus. Now, eukaryotic cells has it in a nucleus. You've got the animal and the plant cell. Both of them, we'll go over their organelles that are inside. So both of them have nucleuses, and I'm guessing it's this one here. So that's the nucleus on each of them. Now, the nucleus is essentially like the brain of the cell. It's telling that cell what its job is. Now, every animal cell that's in your body is going to be different depending on what job it has. So, for example, a cell inside your brain is going to be different to the cell inside your arm, for example. They've got different jobs, and the DNA that's in the nucleus is telling it what that job is of the cell. Same goes for plant cells. Let's say, for example, in the xylem cells are going to have a different job to the root hair cells. So the nucleus, the DNA, is going to tell that cell what its job is. Okay, let's see what other similarities are. Well, I can see mitochondria in both of these. So there's mitochondria in the animal cell, and here it's down here. Now, what the mitochondria does, it's responsible for where the respiration takes place. Now, we've just discussed respiration takes place in both the animal and the plant cell. So essentially, this is where the energy that's released for that cell comes from, the mitochondria. Okay, what else do we have? I can see there's ribosomes here. So ribosomes, so they're there and they are just here as well. So ribosomes are also in both as well. That's a similarity between both of these. What happens at the ribosomes is protein synthesis. What protein synthesis means is just making proteins. We try and use the scientific terms of protein synthesis. How are proteins formed? I'll just keep it a note down here. So protein synthesis, you should know that proteins are made up of amino acids. So amino acids join together in order to make proteins. And again, we'll go over all these little building blocks that make these big molecules, which you need to know for enzymes as well. So that's what happens at the ribosomes, protein synthesis. What else is a similarity between each of these? Well, the cell membrane is another similarity between each of these, the cell membranes here. The job of the cell membrane is going to allow certain things in and out of the cell. Not everything will be able to go in. It's semi-permeable, meaning there's like small gaps in the cell membrane to allow things to go in and out. Is there anything else? Okay, cytoplasm is also in both. I'm guessing it's that one. Okay, and then the cytoplasm is essentially all the liquid that's in the cell, and it's where most of the chemical reactions take place. And then I think that's it really. So they're all the similarities. It's a very common exam question for the similarities and differences between the animal and plant cell. They're all the similarities and the jobs of what they do. So what's the differences? Plant cells have 3 extra organelles. They've got the cell wall, sorry. Now what the cell wall does, think about plant cells and think about animal cells. Plant cells are exposed to the environment, so they need that extra structure that keeps them more rigid and sturdy. Whereas animal cells tend to be encased in, they don't really need that extra protection. So that's what the cell wall does. You also need to know for GCSE that the cell wall is made up of a sugar called cellulose. Think about it, it ends in ose. Glucose is also a sugar, ends in ose as well. So sugars tend to end in ose. So that's what that's made up of. So that's what the cell wall does. What else is there? There's also the vacuole. We'll come back to the vacuole. We'll deal with these first. So the chloroplasts. Now, what happens at the chloroplasts? Well, what does the plant cells do different to the animal cells? They do photosynthesis, and this is where photosynthesis happens. It happens at the chloroplasts. Another thing you need to know about the chloroplasts as well is they make the plant green, so the leaf cell green, because they contain chlorophyll, which essentially reflects the green light in order to show green, essentially. So chlorophyll contained within chloroplast, and the job of the chloroplast is for photosynthesis. And then finally, we've got the vacuole. Now, you can see with the vacuole, it's a really big structure that's in the middle of the cell, and it's pushing all these chloroplasts to the edge of the cell. And the reason why it's pushing all them chloroplasts to the edge of the cell is it wants the maximum amount of photosynthesis to take place. So it's pushing them all to the edge of the cell, so it gets the maximum amount of sunlight in order to carry out photosynthesis. And it also contains cell sap. I'll just write in here. So it contains cell sap, which is just a weak solution of sugars and salts. That's within that plant as well. Okay, so they're the differences between the cells, and you can see how it relates as well to respiration and photosynthesis. So try and make as much links back to respiration as possible. Everything in biology will tend to make a link back to there. So that's why it's really important you have that foundation of what respiration is and the reason, like, why we do it. Okay, moving on. Let's move over to the 3 types of, what could you call these? Processes in order to move substances. So let's put them down like this. So we've got diffusion, we've got osmosis, and we've got active transport. Now, the most common one in GCSE that you'll come across is diffusion. Out of these 3 methods of transport of molecules inside the body. The other 2 also do happen, but they don't have that much emphasis on the other 2 in GCSE, but you do need to know about them. So what are these? They're all modes of transport of molecules. So what diffusion is moving things from a high concentration, just going to write like this, to a low concentration. And this doesn't need no energy, so we call it passive. It's just a passive process. It doesn't require any energy. It just happens by itself. Now, the analogy I remember with diffusion is, imagine somebody's in the corner of a room and they spray air freshener. Eventually, if you're sat on the other side of the room, you will smell it, because naturally the particles are going to move from a high concentration to an area where there's not a lot. So it happens by itself, no energy. Okay, so that's diffusion. And this is the process whereby as well oxygen goes from the alveoli into the capillaries, which we will come on to as well. We've now got osmosis. Now, diffusion is generic with any particles. Osmosis is specific to water particles. And again, it's high concentration to low concentration. But you also have to add as well that it needs to pass through a semi-permeable membrane. And again, this requires no energy. If anything's going from a high concentration to a low concentration, it's just going to happen by itself. So no energy. Okay. And then finally, active transport. Active transport is essentially the opposite of diffusion. I'll just do it in this color. So this time we're going from a low concentration to a high concentration, which isn't really natural. If you've got somewhere where there's less particles to somewhere where there's more particles, of course, you're going to need energy to push them. So this one requires energy, which it gets from respiration. This requires energy. Osmosis, is it the same as saying high water potential to a low water potential? Yeah, I would say that as well. You can say that as well, because from an area of high water potential is an area that has a lot of water molecules essentially as well. Yeah, you can say in terms of potential or even concentration as well. But I think the most important thing as well is also specifying, does it need energy or does it not need energy as well? Okay, so moving on. Another thing as well, anyone in the meeting that hasn't got our summary sheets as well, just email us so we can send you these, because it's got all this condensed information in, as well as these notes I'm going to be making as well. Okay, so another thing with the osmosis as well, you do need to know about the practical, which I'm not going to go over now, but the practical that it's related to is where you get them potato cylinders that you cut out, you leave them in water, and then they gain weight essentially because osmosis has allowed water to get inside the potato. So of course it's going to get heavier, and you measure it by weight. So that's one of the practicals that's relating to it as well. Okay, so now let's go over organization and certain systems within the body that are quite important. So what organization is? So organization, it's essentially how is everything organized in our bodies and animals as well. So it starts off with a group of cells together. Then group of cells together will form tissues. Them tissues together form organs. And a group of certain organs will contribute to an organ system. And there are a few organ systems that you need to know about. So just to throw some examples down that we'll go over today as well, we've got the nervous system. So the system that's responsible for, like, if I touch something hot, I'm going to move my hand away immediately because my nervous system has detected that that's quite bad and can cause a burn. So the organs that are like in the nervous system can be the brain, the spinal cord, skin, because that's a receptor and so on. We've got the circulatory system. So the circulatory system is what the heart's doing. So the heart's the organ that's in that, pumping blood around the body in order to get oxygen around, again, for respiration. We've got the digestive system. The digestive system is a process whereby we're eating food in order to get glucose, again, for respiration. Everything tends to lead back to respiration. We've got the endocrine system. This is the system which is responsible for hormones, essentially. So the release of hormones. What else have we got? We've got the respiratory system. Respiratory system, which involves what organs are involved in that. So the lungs, for example. So yeah, these are some systems that you do need to know about, which we will go over today as well. What organs are involved with them, what cells and tissues are also involved with them, and what's the purpose of them as well. So we'll start off with the digestive system. So this is quite a common one in the exam. So I'll start off with the digestive system. Now remember, the whole always try and think, well, what's the point of something? So with the digestive system, the whole point we eat food is to get glucose in order to do respiration for energy. So you can't just say we're eating food for energy. You need to explain how is it getting there. We're eating food in order to absorb glucose from the food to use that for respiration to then therefore release energy. So try and go in them steps. Okay, so how does the digestive system do this? Well, it starts off at the mouth. So you're going to eat food through your mouth. You are going to chew the food with your teeth. So that will mechanically break down the food. But you've also got saliva as well, which moistens the food. But in that saliva, you've also got an enzyme. Now, we're going to be going over how enzymes work, but enzymes are essentially biological catalysts which help break down food further down in order for us to absorb them. But I'll go over that. So in the saliva, we've got amylase. We've got salivary amylase there. Amylase breaks down starch down into simple sugars. Okay, so that's what happens in the mouth. After the mouth, it goes down through the esophagus. I'm gonna end up spelling this wrong, definitely. Sometimes they say the food pipe as well. Try and avoid saying the food pipe. I would probably recommend sticking with esophagus. Now, when you're in your throat, you've got two pipes. So I just want to make a note of this now. People get confused with this as well. We've got two pipes. We've got the food pipe, which is the esophagus. So the food pipe, which is esophagus, and we've also got the windpipe, which is the trachea. So esophagus and the trachea. So the trachea is part of the respiratory system, us breathing in oxygen down, whereas the food pipe is for food. So say, for example, you swallow something and you end up like choking. The reason why is because most likely it's gone down the wrong pipe, maybe. So you're coughing it back up in order to then go down the right pipe. So yeah, it's split into two. One's for gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide, and one's for food. So we're interested in the esophagus here. So I'll just write food pipe here. Okay, where does it go after that then? It's then going to go to the stomach. Now, in the stomach, we've got hydrochloric acid. So I'm just going to write as HCl. Now, so the pH is very low in the stomach. So remember pH, back to chemistry, your pH could be between 0 and 14. We'll cover this a bit more in tomorrow's session, where 7 is neutral. This below, down here is acidic. And we've got alkaline above 7, or you could say basic as well. So yeah, the pH is very low in the stomach because of this hydrochloric acid. Now, the reason why we've got this hydrochloric acid is to kill bacteria that potentially may be on in food. So let's say, for example, something dropped on the floor and a child just ended up eating it. In order for that child not to get ill, a defense mechanism against that is the hydrochloric acid that's in your stomach to try and kill that bacteria. Okay, so, and then another reason as well is also to churn the food as well. So to kind of just, is acid essentially, right? So you can imagine when adding acid to food, what would happen to that. So, and also there's a lot of enzymes in here as well. So I've seen it as a past exam question where they tell you in the exam what the enzyme is. You're not expected to know it, but it is pepsin. And it's suited to the conditions of the stomach, the acidic conditions of that stomach. So yeah, that's what happens in the stomach. Now, what happens after the stomach? Well, there's a few things that can happen. So let's talk about the other organs as well. We've got the liver. I'm pretty sure the liver is one of the biggest organs in the human body. So it does have a lot of jobs, but one job is that it produces bile. Now, what bile does is anything that's acidic, food-wise, ideally wants to stay just in the stomach. The rest of our body is not acidic. So sometimes if food does end up coming up and you start feeling sick, you do end up feeling that burning feeling on your chest. And that burning feeling is acid, and it's acid where it shouldn't be. So essentially what the liver's doing is producing bile in order to neutralize that acidicness of the food, essentially. So, is there anything else that we need to say about the liver? Okay, so it's essentially producing that bile. So before the food goes into the small intestine or the large intestine, it doesn't want anything acidic there. So the job of the liver is to make sure it produces that bile to neutralize that food before it ends up going to the small intestine or the large intestine. Any excess bile, so excess meaning bile that's produced that does not need to be used, is stored in the gallbladder. In the gallbladder. Okay. What else have we got at this point? We've got the pancreas as well, which also takes place in the digestive system. And what the pancreas does is secreting certain enzymes. Now remember, enzymes, biological catalysts that are essentially breaking down big molecules into small molecules, which we'll go over. One of the enzymes it does release again is also amylase, which we've just spoke about above as well. That's in the saliva. Okay. Now we've got the small intestine and the large intestine. Now, depending on what the food is, depends on where it will go. So we've got the small intestine, we've got the large intestine. Okay, so in the small intestine, let me just highlight all these organs as well, just so. So in the small intestine, this is essentially where the absorption is going to happen. So we need glucose for respiration. But how is it getting that glucose to the cells? So what it does is this is the small intestine where the absorption happens. Anything that's broken down into glucose or even stuff like amino acids that are needed or any smaller molecules are absorbed at this point in the small intestine. So remember they need to be small. So where it starts off like starch, for example, so starch is broken down into simple sugars like glucose. This cannot get absorbed into the blood. It's way too big. It has to go smaller into glucose in order to get absorbed by diffusion at that point. Okay, so the large intestine, what's that responsible for? It's absorbing water. So there's absorption of nutrients, and this is absorption. So I'll just write absorbs water at this point. So I just want to get a little picture of the digestive system that I can keep there as well. So you've got for your notes. So we'll just get one of those as well. Okay, we'll keep that just so you've got rough idea where everything is in the body as well, because it's quite good to visualize it as well. I'll just keep it above here since there's space. You don't necessarily as well like have to have a tablet in order to like make notes like this as well. You can use like a big A3 sheet of paper and kind of blurt it all out that way as well. Okay, so that's the digestive system. Now there's one thing that we kept constantly repeating while speaking about the digestive system there, and that was enzymes. Now, what enzymes are, you need to know the definition for enzymes. Enzymes are, it relates a little bit to chemistry as well, because it's a catalyst essentially. So what I would say is to easily memorize a lot of things in science, if you make these links between biology, chemistry, and physics, and links throughout the topics as well, it's a lot easier to memorize because the understanding's there. Whereas if you just read a textbook and you don't make any of them links, it's much more harder to memorize. So anyways, enzymes, they're biological catalysts which speed up a reaction without getting used up. Okay, so let's break this down. Biological catalysts. Biological just means it's in the body. Catalyst is definition of essentially breaking down something, not breaking down, sorry, speeding up a reaction without getting used up. So this definition that I've given here, I'll just underline it. Speed up a reaction without getting used up. That is the definition of a catalyst. I've just explained what a catalyst is. And essentially what the enzyme is doing is we're breaking down large molecules. So I'll give you some examples of large molecules. So breaking down large molecules into smaller molecules. And the reason why we do that is so them smaller molecules can get absorbed. If they weren't small, they won't be able to get absorbed into the bloodstream and used essentially by stuff like respiration, protein synthesis, like building up proteins, and so on. Okay, so some examples of large molecules. Let's make a little table. So I'll call this the large molecules. So one that we kept repeating above is starch. Now, where do we find stuff like starch? Starch is essentially a carbohydrate, stuff like pastas, bread, and so on. But starch tends to be in quite a lot of things that we eat. We've got proteins. Proteins come from stuff like meats, chicken, meat, so on. And then what else do you need to know about in GCSE? Okay, lipids. What lipids are? Fat molecules. So greasy food, stuff as like burgers or so on, contains that fat. Now, what you need to know for each of these is what enzyme breaks them down, and then what are the smaller molecules that they're breaking down into. Molecules. Okay, so starch breaks down into, we say simple sugars, but you can say glucose, because glucose is the specific one that's getting absorbed into the blood. Okay, so which enzyme does that? It's amylase. Okay, so the enzyme amylase, which we've already discussed, it gets secreted by the pancreas. It's also in our saliva as well. Breaks down starch into glucose. Proteins, what do they break down into? We said it above that proteins, the building blocks that they're made up of, are amino acids, which are small enough to get absorbed into the blood. And what enzyme breaks them down? It's called protease. Notice how it ends in ase as well. That tends to be the common trend for enzymes, not always, but tends to be. Lipids are broken down. This one's a bit harder to remember, but it's glycerol and fatty acids. And the enzyme which breaks this down is called lipase. So these are the three main ones that you do need to memorize and what they break down what into something. But in the exam, and they have done this in the past, they can throw any random enzyme at you, and you should be able to apply what you know to that scenario, especially if you're doing the higher paper. So say, for example, I've seen in past exam questions where they've given the enzyme pepsin. Pepsin is a type of protease that's in the stomach. So that's another one. I've seen a past exam question on lactase. So lactase is a type of enzyme that breaks down lactose, which they tell you all this in the exam, but they just want you to apply your knowledge to it. So this is found in cheese, milk products, so dairy essentially. So if somebody is lactose intolerant, meaning that they can't have milk and cheese because they'll get stomach issues, it's because most likely they don't have the lactase enzyme in order to break it down. So it doesn't break down then. So therefore it's just in the stomach, causes them cramps. Okay, so enzymes are really important to the digestive system, but because it's so important to the digestive system, it's also important for other everyday bodily functions. So we need the amino acids from them. If you can't get them from the digestive system, that's going to cause issues. We need glucose from the digestive system broken down. If we don't have that glucose, we're not able to respire. So you can see that it's a knock-on effect. We need it. So these enzymes are really important in that process. So there's two factors that affect if an enzyme is going to be working at its optimum. Now, what optimum means is its best. So the two factors are temperature and pH. So you should have guessed pH because we spoke about the stomach acid. There's enzymes there which are suited to just the stomach area, so low pH. And depending on where you are in your body depends on what pH is needed for that certain enzyme. So an enzyme that's going to be in the stomach is not going to work well in the mouth, for example, because they're different pH levels. In terms of temperature, you should know that the human body temperature is 37 degrees Celsius. And this is the temperature at which the body works at its optimum. Optimum just basically means its best. So we say this is our optimum, essentially best temperature. Try and use the word optimum though, rather than best temperature. So usually when you're poorly, you're deviating like 1 degree Celsius away from this and you can get ill. The reason why you get ill, your enzymes are not working, your food's not breaking down, you feel sick because your food's not broken down, it's just sat there. So that's why they check your temperature when you're ill. So you should be able to also annotate graphs describing both temperature and pH. So we'll go over one. Okay, so with temperature, the graph tends to look like this. So if you've got a really low temperature, so we'll say this is 0 degrees Celsius, we'll say, I don't know, this is 45, so quite high in the body. Hold on, before labeling that, let me draw the shape of the curve. Okay, so you can see it slowly starts increasing at first. This is rate of reaction. Again, this links to chemistry. You will come up across loads of rate of reaction graphs as well. I'm not sure if you've started it in school yet, but this overlaps quite nicely with chemistry as well. So as we can see, as the temperature's increasing up until a certain point, that's the best rate of reaction, the best amount of enzymes that are going to break down the amount of food. And I'm sure you can guess that's 37 degrees coming down here. And you can see after that, so going downwards, it's going back to 0 again. So let's just say 45 degrees Celsius, it just does not work at all. And we'll explain why it doesn't work. There's a reason why that happens, which you also need to know as well. So just to explain again, as you increase the temperature of the body, the better rate of reaction of enzyme. Ideally, you want it at 37 degrees Celsius because that's the best. But you can see down here, nothing happens. However, if you go past this optimum and you go lower, the enzyme denatures. And we're going to speak about what does enzyme denature mean. So at this point, after, really, so I'll just do it like that. Enzyme denatured. Really important word to use in your exams. Okay, let's have a look at the graph of pH. What pH looks like. Now, it's going to be different depending on which enzyme it is because every enzyme has a different optimum pH, but it tends to look just like a bell shape, just like this. So a little bit different to temperature where it has like a midpoint. Now, this midpoint temperature is not temperature, sorry, pH is going to be different depending on what enzyme it is. So let's say, for example, if it's an enzyme in the stomach, which needs to be acidic, this probably is going to be pH of 2 because it's low. Whereas if it is something that's in your mouth, for example, that's quite neutral, maybe this will maybe be 8, for example. So again, that is the optimum because it's the peak. That's also the optimum here. So make sure you're able to, the axis here would also be rate of reaction, just like the other one. Make sure you're able to read these graphs, read them off. They'll ask what's the optimum pH of this certain enzyme that you might have never heard before. They're just checking that you understand the graphs, what they mean in terms of pH and temperature. The temperature graph won't change because humans work at 37 degrees Celsius. However, maybe they might give you a different species. You still need to be able to analyze that graph and see what's their optimum temperature for enzymes. Okay, so we mentioned this word denatured. What does this mean? Well, let's speak a little bit about how enzymes work. Now, there's a few different theories as to how they work. However, for GCSE, you just need to know the lock and key model. Anyone that's thinking of doing biology at A level, you start learning about loads of different models as to how these enzymes work. But for GCSE, it's just a lock and key model that you need to know about. And it's quite self-explanatory. It's literally a lock and key. So let's say I've got an enzyme. Looks a bit like a Pac-Man. So this is my enzyme. On the enzyme, the most important part is the active site. So this is the active site here. And what the active site is going to do, it's going to be a very specific shape depending on what enzyme it's going to be. So if this was protease, which is going to break down proteins, it's going to be a different shape to maybe something with lipids. So as you can see, different shape. So that shape is very specific. So let's write that down. The shape is specific. And that shape is going to be complementary to its substrate. Now the substrate is what it's going to take in. So let's draw a little substrate which is going to fit. So as you can see, that substrate is going to fit that enzyme. What happens then is the substrate will bind to it, just like a lock and key. So they will join together like so. And then the enzyme will let go of it and it'll have broken down. As you can see, the substrate's broken down into two pieces. So what's to say at this point? And then you can see the enzyme's not being used and it can be used again. So it's not getting chipped away or anything. So the analogy I tend to use is, imagine you're making a cup of tea, you put sugar in the tea, but you're not just going to leave the sugar there. It will eventually dissolve if you just leave it. But to make the rate of reaction go faster, you get a spoon and you mix the sugar in so it dissolves faster. But the spoon's not melted. You can use that spoon again. So the spoon is your enzyme that you keep using again and again to speed up a reaction without it getting used up. Now, what happens if the pH or the temperature isn't right? Well, the enzyme's going to denature. So if temperature and pH is not right, so essentially it's deviated wherever these lower peaks are, where we've just spoken about. So wherever them low peaks are, if it's not optimum, the enzyme's going to denature. So enzyme denature, what does that mean? It means the shape, let's just say shape of active site has changed. So if the shape of the active site has changed, then this is not going to fit. This is not going to fit inside anymore. So it can't fit inside anymore. So it can't break down. So then it stays big. So it's not broken down. It's not absorbed into the blood by the small intestine, and then you're ill essentially. So that's how illnesses are caused. Essentially, it's usually enzymes, which one of the reasons that could potentially cause it. Okay, I'm just going to give you a 5-minute break there because we're going to go over quite a few systems there. So if you just want to come back at 57-ish, and then we'll continue. So I'll just turn my mic and camera off for then, and then we'll continue. So I'll see you in 5 minutes. So just in terms of active transport as well, just saying low water potential to high water potential, I wouldn't say that because it's active transport's not just to do with just water molecules. It's for any and that's not water, right? So I would stick with probably saying the particles side of it as well. But then again, I will check for the OCI exam board, but personally, I wouldn't agree with that. But with science as well, your answer could be right, but it depends on what your exam board's saying in the mark scheme as well. So just to give an example of it, like with chemistry, which we'll cover tomorrow, for diamond properties, for example, if you don't use the word hard, you would lose marks. If you said strong, for example, you wouldn't get the mark, but if you said hard, you would. So there's certain wordings that you need to remember. So you could necessarily be right in science, but it depends on what the mark scheme says and what the specification says. Anyways, let's continue with this now. So what we're going to go over now is, so we've spoke about how glucose gets into the body. Let's speak about a little bit about oxygen now. So where does oxygen start off? Well, it's going to be the respiratory system. So what's the respiratory system? The respiratory system's to do with the lungs. Okay, so it's to do with the lungs. So where do we breathe in oxygen first? Well, we're breathing it through our mouth. I'm not going to write all this down, but we'll speak about it. We're breathing through our mouth and our nose as well, actually. That's a really common one that kids forget. They say the mouth, but then they also forget that your nose is also breathing in as well. So mouth and nose is taking in oxygen at first. I don't know if you've ever seen like on TikTok and stuff when people sell like mouth tape for you to wear at nighttime, so you just breathe through your nose because it's apparently better or whatever, but at nighttime. But yeah, we've got the mouth and nose where we're taking our oxygen in when we're breathing in, and we're taking out our carbon dioxide when we're breathing out. After that, it then goes to the trachea, which is going down and into the lungs. So this is the now important part. So here's our trachea. This is going to be such a terrible drawing, but we'll explain it. So the trachea is essentially in our throat. This then splits off into two pipes. So we're now getting into the lungs, by the way. So let me just draw the lungs. Okay, so we're now getting into the lungs. In the lungs, it splits off into two of these pipes. So you can see we've got two lungs, right? So it splits down two. We call this the bronchus. So bronchus for two. To call one of them, you say bronchi for one. Okay, so there are your two pipes. Then after that, they split into even more smaller branches. And these smaller branches, so there's a lot of them. I'll get an actual picture so you can see. They're called bronchioles, all them little trees that are coming off. Now, at the end of them branches, we've got something called alveoli. So the alveoli is the cloud-like things that look like cauliflower at the end. So the alveoli, which I would say by far is the most important thing in the lungs. Reason being is this is where diffusion is going to happen so it can get into the blood. So this is where the overlap between the respiratory system and the circulatory system happens. So when we speak about circulatory system, we're going to come back to here. So let me just get a better picture of the lungs. So compare it to mine. Okay, that's fair enough, that one here. Okay. So as you can see, kind of what I described, let's look further at the lungs here. So as you can see, the trachea that I just mentioned, which is down here, which then splits off into the bronchus, which is there. And then there's your tree-like substance, the bronchioles. And then at the end of them, you can see the alveoli. That's within the lungs. And they've just zoomed into the alveoli here, which is pretty good. We're going to come back to this now. Okay, so that's the respiratory system. The job of the respiratory system is to take in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide. That's its job, to the breathing, essentially. We're going to move over to the circulatory system now and see how it links. I'll do this on a new page. So the circulatory system. So the circulatory system is the system, it's essentially pumping blood around the body to transport oxygen. So again, it's for oxygen, the purpose of our heart pumping blood around. Okay, let me get a picture of the heart, because the heart that I'm going to be drawing is going to be slightly different. But I want you to use this just to refer back to it. Okay, copy image. So when talking about the heart system, I'm going to refer back to this diagram because it's the actual diagram of the heart. But I'm going to explain it in a different way just so you can memorize it a little bit easier. Okay, so as you can see here, I'll keep my diagram side by side with this. The circulatory system starts off at the heart. The heart is pumping blood around the body. So the heart's a big muscle that's in the center of our body. It works on electrical impulses, our heart does. So our heart works on electrical impulses. So it's a bit weird, we work on electricity, but that's the reason why when someone's had a heart attack and you're trying to revive them, you use them electrical pads in order to get their heart working again and start pumping blood again. So yeah, our heart works on electrical impulses. It's got 4 chambers. Now I'm going to represent the heart with a circle. Okay, so I'll keep that there. And it's split into 4 chambers, which you can see up here as well. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll keep referring back to that up there. Now, these chambers, we're going to be looking at our sides opposite. So if you were stood in front of somebody and you raised your right hand, the person in front of you, their right hand's going to be opposite. So you're looking at this heart as though it's somebody stood in front of you. So your right and left are opposite. So that's the reason why. So this is the right side of the heart. And this is the left side of the heart, as weird as that is, because it's somebody that's in front of you, so you do the opposite. The top chambers are known as the atrium, and the bottom chambers are known as the ventricles. So this one here is the right atrium. I'm just going to call it RA. This is the left atrium. And then on the bottom, we've got the right ventricle, and we've got the left ventricle. As you can see up here, I'm going to highlight them. Here's your right, can't even see that, I'll box it red. There's the right atrium. There is the right ventricle, the left ventricle, and the left atrium. Okay, now out of each of these, we've got 4 major blood vessels that go into each of these. So I'm just going to rub out this, and there's my 4 very important blood vessels that are to do with the heart. Okay, and the reason why I am doing this is just to explain the process very simply to you rather than using this diagram up here, and then you can apply it to that. So it's just for memorization purposes. Now, before we jump into the process of the heart and the circulatory system, there's 3 blood vessels that you need to know about. Now, when thinking about blood vessels, I would just say think of them as roads in your body. If you were to see all the blood vessels are in our body, I'll just show you. Blood vessels in body. You can see there's a high network of them, so I'll keep this here just so you can visualize the amount of blood vessels that we've got all over our body. It's the reason why, like, when blood's like meant to be like flowing through your body, say you're sat down like on the floor for long periods of time, and then you get up and you've got all the pins and needles that's in your feet and legs. It's because your blood hasn't really circulated properly. So then when you stand up, slowly, the pins and needles are going because the blood is circulating yet again. So as we could see from this person diagram, the vast amount of blood vessels that we've got in the body, and I don't even think this is a true representation. There's a lot more than that. So yeah, we'll keep this scary looking guy over here. Okay, 3 types of blood vessels. Think of them as roads, and each road has a direction. So the difference in blood vessels depends on which direction the blood is going. Like, is it going to the heart or from the heart? So there are arteries, there's veins, and there's capillaries. So these are the three types of blood vessels. The arteries take blood away from the heart. And the way I would remember that is arteries begin with an A, so taking it away from the heart, that's how I remember it. So if arteries take blood away from the heart, what's the opposite of away from the heart? To the heart. So the veins take the blood to the heart. And then capillaries are essentially kind of joining these together, and it's essentially where the gas exchange is happening. So gas exchange happens here. Gas exchange happens here, which we will speak about. They're essentially up here, this section over here, which we're going to come back to. And the reason why it happens here is because it's only one cell thick. They're very thin. In order for diffusion to happen, you need something very thin for it to be able to go through. These two are way too thick. There's no way that oxygen and carbon dioxide can pass through them. So yeah, that's the reason, that's where gas exchange is happening, which is the whole purpose of blood, right? So the capillaries need to be there. Now, let me get a picture of these so you can see. The differences between each of them. Okay, that is not a good picture because I'll explain why. I can't see the valve. There's a valve in one of these, which none of them show. I'll just draw it in myself anyway. Okay, so as you can see here, the vein's got a valve in. That circular part there, which I'll just draw in anyway. This vein here has a valve inside it. Can't see that. Okay, but we'll come back to this. It's to do with blood pressures and such as well. Okay, so as you can see, there's the artery, vein, what on earth? Come back to that. And we've got the capillary, which is very small, as you can see. Okay, now two other things I also want you to understand as well. Wherever you see the word coronary, it's usually to do with the heart. So coronary is to do with the heart. If you see the word pulmonary, that's to do with the lungs. So the reason why I'm telling you all this stuff is just for you to be able to memorize a lot easier rather than just looking and memorizing the process of how everything's going through the heart. If you remember these certain like keys, you should be able to hopefully remember it a lot easier. So coronary to do with the heart, and pulmonary is to do with the lungs. Okay, so now let's get started with the heart. Now, the whole point of the heart is to pump blood around the body in order to get the oxygen around the body. Okay, so we're going to start from this side. Now, when we're explaining the heart, I'm just going to explain in a single order. But both sides of the heart are working at the same time. So we call this the double circulatory system because the blood is entering the heart and then leaving the heart, and it happens at the same time. A very fast process. Every heartbeat that you can feel this is happening, what we're going to be speaking about right now. Okay, so there's three things you need to know about each of the four sections. You need to know where has the blood come from or where is it going to. You need to know which major vessel it's going through and where it's going, whether it's oxygenated or deoxygenated. So oxygenated means it's got oxygen in that blood. Deoxygenated means it hasn't got oxygen in that blood. Okay, so let's start up here on this first section here. So blood has come from the rest of the body. And the reason why it's coming back to the heart is because it needs oxygen. So it's already used all the oxygen that it's got for respiration. So it's come back to the heart, so it needs more. So at this point, the blood is deoxygenated. So it's deoxygenated at this point. And which vessel is it coming through? So in here, where's it coming through? Well, since it's coming to the heart, it's going to be a type of vein, and it's a really important vein. It's called the vena cava. So this here is the vena cava. So I can remember that it's a vein because of the direction, and there's only one vena cava, so it has to be that one. Okay, it then passes through the right atrium, but it passes through a valve. So there's a valve in between each of these atriums. Draw them a bit better. There's a valve between the atrium and the ventricles, and what that valve does is allow the blood to go in one direction. So once it's a bit like a door, if the blood is flowing through, then it's going to close to make sure it doesn't come back on itself. So yeah, they're the valves that are in between. Now after the right ventricle, it's leaving this vessel here. Now where is it going now? Well, it's still deoxygenated. Blood hasn't got the oxygen from the heart. It needs to go get it from the lungs. So it needs to go to the lungs. And it is still deoxygenated at this point. It hasn't got oxygen in, so it's still deoxygenated. Now, because it's leaving the heart, it's going away from the heart, it's going to be an artery. So it's going to be an artery, but because it's going to the lungs, remember what we said about lungs? Lungs have the word pulmonary with it. So over here, this is I'll do it in red. This is the pulmonary artery. So it's taking blood away from the heart, that's why it's an artery. Because it's going to the lungs, that's the reason why it's the pulmonary artery. So okay, so this is the pulmonary pulmonary artery. I'm just going to get rid of these, the right and left side. Okay, that's the pulmonary artery at that point. Okay, so now the blood has gone to the lungs to go get oxygen. This is where this part here happens. So these alveoli that we were speaking about, they're wrapped in capillaries. So remember, capillaries is where gas exchange happens. And if you have a look at this picture, let me zoom in a little bit. We can see the alveoli is wrapped in these capillaries. And what's happening is, let me do a bit of a simplified picture so you can understand. Let's say that's the alveoli. And inside that alveoli, we've just breathed in oxygen. Now the capillaries, which I can draw in red, let's just say it's like that. The oxygen that's in this alveoli, the alveoli has very thin walls. It's going to diffuse out and go inside the capillary. So the oxygen is now coming inside the blood through the alveoli into the capillary. Now remember, at the same time, carbon dioxide is also leaving as well. So CO2 is also leaving the blood and going through the alveoli so we can breathe it out. But it's not really that relevant right now, but I just want you to make you aware of that. Okay, so let's go back to the heart now. So at the lungs, it's done what we've just spoken about. So now it's coming back to the heart. So it's coming from the lungs. And of course, it's from the lungs, it's already got the oxygen. So now the blood is oxygenated. So it's coming into the left atrium. So because it's coming to the heart is a type of vein. So this is a vein. But because it's come from the lungs, we have to add that word in. Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, perfect. There's a lot of issues with this call today for some reason. Okay, anyways, as we were saying, it's now come out of the aorta, it's oxygenated at this point, and it's going to the rest of the body. So what's happening with that oxygen at the rest of the body? It's going to go use it for respiration at all the cells in our body. And then the process starts again. The oxygen gets used by the body. It's then going to come back up and then do the whole process again and again and again. And that's happening every single heartbeat. So yeah, that's the circulatory system. I would highly recommend understanding the process using this circle thing that I've used and then apply it to this one here. So as you can see, it's the same thing that I've discussed. Just to show you, starts off through the vena cava, goes in through the valve. It's just a bit more of a complicated diagram, which gets students confused. So the most important part is understanding the process and then apply it to the actual diagram. So that's the circulatory system. There's one other thing. Okay, I was supposed to speak about the vein. Now, as you can see, arteries are taking blood away from the heart. Okay, so understand the process. Arteries are taking blood away from the heart. So as you can see, it's got a very thick outer wall. Now, if you've got a really thick outer wall, it's because the pressure of blood that's coming through that artery is very high. So it needs to be able to withstand it. The lumen is just a hole that's in between. So the black part, which is the hole, that's known as the lumen. So as you can see, the artery has a very thick layer of muscles to allow that high pressure. And if something's going through a tube at a high pressure, so think of a water pipe, it will stay in one direction because of that pressure. Now with the veins, you can see it's got a thinner wall, so it can't really withstand that pressure. It doesn't come back to the heart at such a high pressure compared to the arteries. So that's why the veins also have a valve inside it. The arteries don't have a valve because the pressure keeps it in one direction. The vein doesn't have a high pressure, but the blood still needs to stay in one direction. So that valve helps the blood stay in one direction. So yeah, that's the reason why an artery doesn't have a valve, but a vein does. That's been a past exam question as well. Another thing they can ask you as well is how is the capillaries and alveoli adapted? You can say the capillaries are very thin, so it allows diffusion to happen of oxygen. You can say the alveoli is also very thin, so it allows diffusion to happen. You could say there's loads of little alveoli, so that's a large surface area. Actually, I'll write that down just in case you. It's a large surface area. Because there's loads of little alveoli in our lungs rather than just one big one. So that's a large surface area of alveoli. So many different alveoli spots for that capillaries to be wrapped around in order to get that oxygen. Okay, so another thing you need to know about the blood as well. The blood contains 4 things. So it contains red blood cells. Now, the red blood cells are what transport oxygen. So everything we've just been speaking about right now, the red blood cells are adapted to transport that oxygen around the body. We've also got white blood cells. Now, what white blood cells are responsible for are fighting off pathogens, stuff like bacteria, and so on. That's white blood cells. We've then got platelets. Now, what platelets are responsible for are clotting the blood. Now, let's say you've fallen down, you've grazed your knee, and it's cut open essentially. The blood isn't going to keep bleeding out. Eventually, it will stop because your skin has scabbed. Well, it's not your skin that's scabbed over it, it's the platelets that have clotted the blood to stop you from bleeding out continuously. There are some people that have a disease that don't have platelets in their blood. So whenever they like fall over, cut their knee, or whatever, they have to go to the hospital to get stitched up so they don't keep bleeding out. And then finally, we've got the plasma, which essentially holds all these things within the blood. It's like the cytoplasm of the blood. It's like the liquid part of the blood. So yeah, the blood's made up of these 4 things. Make sure you understand what each of them do as well. So we've got 10 minutes left of the class, unfortunately. There's still quite a lot of content we could have potentially done. But what I'm going to go over is I'm going to speak about the endocrine system. Because that's one that a lot of students aren't really a fan of. So we'll go over the endocrine system and then we'll wrap it up there. So the endocrine system. or endocrine system, however you want to pronounce it. Now, what this is responsible for is to do with hormones, this whole system. Now, what is a hormone? A hormone is a chemical messenger. Now, if we name some hormones, it might make a little bit of sense. So, hormones such as testosterone, that's in boys, you've got insulin, glucagon to do with blood sugar, you've got estrogen, LH, progesterone for females, we've got adrenaline, and so on. So, these are all chemical messengers that are telling your body to do something. It's a chemical that's secreted to give a message to your body to do something. Okay, so we'll talk about where they all are in the body. So my terrible attempt at drawing a human. Okay, that's the head, neck. Okay, and then that can be their body. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so in our brain, well, not in our brain, but just behind our brain, we've got something called the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland. And this is known as the master gland. So this is telling every other gland in the body kind of what to do, and what to secrete, really. So there's a lot of negative feedback mechanisms that occur here as well. So yeah, the pituitary gland is a master gland, tells other glands what to do. Glands tend to be where hormones come from. So this is where they get secreted from. Okay. Now if we, in our throat, the two sides, you should feel two like lumps there, but we've got the thyroid gland in our neck. So the thyroid gland. And the hormone that gets released from here is called thyroxine. So thyroxine is quite a common issue with people as well. So people that don't produce enough thyroxine. Now, what thyroxine is responsible for is your metabolism. Now, the definition of metabolism is the sum of all the chemical reactions that are happening in your body. So usually, like when you see quite a big person, you say, oh, they've got a slow metabolism. Or skinny person, you'll say they've got a fast metabolism, like they quickly use up their energy and like use up their food essentially rather than storing it. So yeah, metabolism, if you've got quite a low metabolism, you'll feel quite tired all the time, low of energy and so on. So yeah, that's what the thyroxine is responsible for, metabolism essentially. What else have we got? We've got the pancreas. Let's just say the pancreas is here. Now, what the pancreas is responsible for is controlling blood glucose concentration. Now, again, not to be repetitive, but that's to do with respiration. You have to control your blood glucose concentration for respiration. You need a good amount of glucose in your blood in order to do respiration. And that's what the pancreas is responsible for. And the hormones which are responsible for that are called insulin and glucagon. So I'll just put the reason there. It's for blood glucose concentration. So anyone that knows anybody that's diabetic, they might say, oh, I've got a sugar problem. That sugar they're referring to is glucose. You might know them to have insulin injections or medication to help with diabetes, but anyone that's got diabetes, their issue is to do with this section of the body in insulin production or responding to insulin. So that's where the issues come from, diabetes. What else have we got? We've got the adrenal gland, which is here. Now, the adrenal gland, the hormone that releases is adrenaline. Now, you might have heard of like feeling like you've got an adrenaline rush. What that is if your body releases adrenaline, usually when you're in scary situations. So imagine like you're at quite a height, for example, and you're looking over a cliff, like you start feeling that adrenaline rush, like the goosebumps, the sweat. It's because your adrenaline's getting released. Or if you're going on a roller coaster, for example, you get that adrenaline rush, that scare. So the whole point of adrenaline getting released is to protect you. It's a fight or flight response. Should have done that in green. Hold on, let's see if we can change that. I'll just change it to that. Fight or flight, essentially. So it's to protect you from doing silly things, really. It's mechanism for that, really. Okay, what else have we got? Well, I guess depending on whether you're male or female, if you are male, you're going to produce testosterone, which is in the testes, so testosterone. Now, what testosterone is responsible for, when boys hit puberty, they'll start getting facial hair, they'll start getting deeper voices, they'll start being able to build muscle a lot more easier. That's testosterone that's causing that. That's the hormone testosterone. And then in females, once they reach puberty, they'll produce stuff like estrogen, progesterone, LH, FSH, and so on. Within the ovaries, estrogen and progesterone's formed. And again, that's for the menstrual cycle, for them to be able to get pregnant, and so on. So that's what, depending on what gender you are, depends on what hormone you produce. And it's the reason why, say, for example, females can't build muscle easy compared to like males because of that testosterone. So some females inject themselves with testosterone in order to be able to build that muscle, but then in turn they'll get other features like maybe hairier as well, because that's what it contributes to as well. So yeah, that's the endocrine system in a nutshell, where everything is, what hormones are produced and what is responsible for. Next time when we do a biology class, we can discuss these even more further. But essentially, they all work on negative feedback mechanisms. So I'll just quickly, 2 minutes, just explain what a negative feedback mechanism is. Let's say this is your blood glucose concentration all day long. It's going up and down, up and down, up and down. Your negative feedback mechanism is essentially controlling whether it's going low or high, depending on what hormone's released. So we call that negative feedback. And it happens with quite a lot of these processes. So stuff like thyroxine has a negative feedback mechanism. This blood glucose concentration one also has it as well. So yeah, it does grow quite significantly, but we'll wrap it up there. I'll get everything sent out, the recording sent out as well. Apologies for the issues with the class internet sound and the glitchingness as well. But hopefully that was okay, and I'll get everything sent out. Okay, thank you for joining, guys.